My name is Major Katie Ward, 35, United States Army. I've faced enemy fire, but nothing cut deeper than what my father said across that dinner table. He leaned back, smirked, and said, "Nobody here actually likes you." They thought I'd stay silent. They forgot who trained me. If you've ever seen arrogance mistake quiet for weakness, hit subscribe. You're about to see what discipline looks like when it answers back. I'm Major Katie Ward, United States Army, 35 years old and 15 years in uniform. Most days at Fort Belvoir follow a rhythm so precise it could be scored for a metronome. Briefing at 0700, emails by 0900, run at 1800. Order is oxygen. When I step into my apartment each evening, the silence feels earned, a quiet debrief after another day of containing chaos. I hang my beret on the same hook, line up my boots under the console table, and pour a glass of iced tea. The clink of ice against glass is the only sound. That controlled silence used to be peace. Lately, it feels like a holding pattern. My family doesn't understand silence. They fill every gap with noise, opinions, jokes that cut a little too deep, laughter that feels like an inspection. The last time we were in the same room, my father asked if I was still doing that army thing. He said it like a temporary hobby, as if deployments were scrapbooking retreats. My mother smiled tightly and changed the subject to my sister's new condo. That pattern has been our family doctrine since I was 16. Jessica shines, I serve. I learned early that quiet was safer than defense. The night I won the state marksmanship trophy, I set it on the dinner table between the salt and pepper shakers. My father barely glanced at it before asking Jessica about her speech team. When she mocked, "Who are you planning to shoot with that thing, Katie?" He chuckled. I slid the trophy under my bed that night and decided that if they wouldn't see me, they would at least never see me break. My grandfather was the exception, a World War II veteran who smelled of Old Spice and machine oil. He called what he saw in me steadiness. That word became my private motto. Steadiness carried me through beast barracks, through sandstorms in Kandahar, through every moment when fear or humiliation threatened to rattle my trigger finger. It still anchors me now, standing alone in this apartment with the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint smell of disinfectant. The aroma of control. That's when the phone buzzed. "Mom," flashed on the screen. I hesitated a half breath before answering. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was bright. Too bright. "Katie, your father and I are so excited you'll be in Boston next week. Let's have a family dinner, just the four of us. You can tell us all about that promotion thing." There was a pause, a soft static where a compliment should have been. "Sure," I said. "Tell me when and where." She named a steakhouse so expensive it smelled like my father's approval. I could almost see him leaning back in the booth, surveying the room like a commander inspecting his troops. After we hung up, I stood for a moment, the phone still warm in my hand. Old instincts kicked in. Mission prep. If they wanted a dinner, I'd treat it like an operation. Control what I could. Appearance, posture, tone. No uniform. They saw it as a provocation. Just a simple black dress, minimal jewelry, and shoes I could run in if I had to. Before turning in, I opened my dresser drawer and took out the small velvet box holding my bronze star. I didn't wear it. I just looked at it. The metal was cold and unassuming in my palm, a reminder that recognition can exist without applause. Then I slipped it back into its place, closed the drawer softly, and laid out the black dress for the morning flight. As I turned off the light, the apartment fell silent again. Somewhere between the click of the switch and the whir of the HVAC, I caught my own reflection in the window. Shoulders square, eyes steady. It struck me that the uniform had never made me strong. It had only made my strength visible. Tomorrow night at that table, I'd need every ounce of it. The mission was simple. Show up, stay calm, survive the evening intact. But any soldier knows, no plan survives first contact. Boston in early spring has a chill that hides under expensive perfume. The streets glisten with rain that hasn't quite decided whether to fall or hover. I arrived early, as always. Soldiers learn that timing is respect, even when the mission involves family instead of briefing rooms. The Capitol Grille's doors opened with a hush of air conditioning and polished formality, the kind of place where napkins weigh more than apologies. I checked in, gave the hostess my name, and was guided to a table set for 4. A corner booth? My father's preference. Strategic view of the room, back to the wall. Even now, I notice things like that. Situational awareness doesn't switch off just because you're off base. I sat down, ordered sparkling water, and let my eyes wander. Walnut paneling, low jazz, the faint tang of dry-aged beef. It was their terrain, but I'd learned to read hostile environments. They arrived at 1900 sharp. My mother first, her smile rehearsed, her hand resting on my father's arm like a peace flag she didn't believe in. Jessica followed in a fitted blazer that probably cost more than my first month's officer pay. "Well, look who actually came," she said lightly, as though attendance were optional. "Good to see you too," I replied, tone neutral. Dinner began like most of our family gatherings, a small war disguised as conversation. My father opened with logistics, flight delays, parking, the weather, before moving to the real subject, comparison. He spoke about Jessica's latest promotion at her firm, her good instincts for leadership. Then he turned to me. "And you, Katie? Still doing field coordination?" "Training and command evaluations, sir," I said. Old habits die hard. I still called him sir. He smirked. "Evaluations, so paperwork." "Paperwork that decides readiness for deployment," I replied, calm as a range flag on a windless day. Jessica laughed, cutting through the air like a dull blade. "Still bossing around soldiers? Some things never change." "I don't boss," I said. "I lead." It was all so familiar. The same formation, the same hits. I'd been through this drill before. They teased the uniform they didn't understand, tested the limits of my patience, mistook discipline for emotionlessness. What they never grasped was that silence wasn't surrender. Silence was reconnaissance. Between courses, the waiter refilled their wine glasses. My father swirled his drink, watching the legs of the Merlot slide down like a clock counting seconds. "You know, Katie," he said, "I sometimes think you hide behind that uniform. All that talk about honor, maybe it's just armor." The word armor hung there, heavy and deliberate. I met his gaze. "Armor keeps you alive, Dad." He chuckled, satisfied as if he'd confirmed a private hypothesis. My mother shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the waiter as though the right service might save the evening. Jessica scrolled on her phone under the table. Classic withdrawal tactic. I took a slow sip of water and observed them, the way I might study an uncooperative unit. Same dynamic. Dominant ego, quiet enabler, opportunistic ally. I'd trained teams like this into cohesion overseas. Funny how harder it was at home. "Tell us something exciting," my mother said suddenly, desperate to redirect. "Something from the army." I paused. Civilians always wanted the stories. Sanitized bravery, cinematic sacrifice. But when you tell them the truth, the fear, the discipline, the cost, their eyes glaze over. "Exciting?" I echoed softly. Last week, I watched a young sergeant hold the line when his whole team was under review. He didn't argue. He fixed the problem. That's exciting. My father exhaled through his nose. "Sounds like bureaucracy to me." That was the rhythm of my family. Mock, deflect, dismiss, repeat. I began to understand that this dinner wasn't reconciliation. It was reconnaissance for them, too. They were testing how much control they still had over me. Under the table, my hand brushed against the small velvet box in my bag, the Bronze Star. I'd brought it without meaning to show it, only to remind myself why I could endure this. The medal wasn't proof of worth. It was proof of endurance. Dessert menus arrived, though no one seemed hungry. My sister finally looked up from her phone. "Oh, by the way, Mom said you're coming to the wedding, right?" I blinked. The wedding already happened, Jess. Oh, she said with a feigned innocence that didn't reach her eyes. Right. Guess I forgot to invite you. My bad. The table went quiet. My mother's fork froze midair. My father pretended to read the check. The sound of a glass being set down too hard echoed in the pause. I could feel the familiar burn rise in my chest. Not anger, not even hurt. Something colder. Something clear. I folded my napkin methodically. Every motion measured, deliberate. They thought I was withdrawing, but in truth, I was preparing. Every soldier knows that before contact, there's always reconnaissance. The calm before engagement. And this was reconnaissance complete. The moment it happened, it was almost quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you, the kind that hums before impact. The waiter had just cleared the plates. Somewhere across the restaurant, a cork popped, laughter burst, then softened into the low rhythm of silverware and soft jazz. Our table, though, sat in its own gravity field. My father leaned back, the leather creaking under him, eyes fixed on me with that faint smile he used before delivering a verdict. You know, he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. No one here actually likes you, Katie. You're an embarrassment in that uniform. The words didn't hit like bullets. They landed like artillery, distant, heavy, delayed. Then the sound rolled through you. For a heartbeat, everything around me blurred. The room's light dimmed at the edges, focus narrowing to his face. Ruddy from wine, satisfied with the precision of his shot. My mother's fork scraped porcelain. She didn't look up. Just pressed a small piece of steak to the edge of her knife and cut again as though silence could undo what had been said. Jessica smirked. Dad, she said, pretending to scold him while enjoying every second. Be nice. It's not her fault she takes everything so seriously. The waiter froze mid-step a few tables away. He wasn't sure if he should intervene or vanish. Civilians never know how to handle a firefight when it's emotional instead of ballistic. My training took over. Slow breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Command voice internalized. Assess terrain. Emotion was noise. Noise got soldiers killed. I set my water glass down carefully, aligning it with the fold of the napkin. I looked at my father. Not as a parent, but as a hostile contact in a controlled environment. You're right, sir, I said evenly. No one here likes me. That's been established. He blinked, startled by the lack of reaction. He expected tears, anger, anything to confirm power. Instead, he found nothing. Just protocol. I folded the napkin into a neat square, placed it beside my plate, and rose. The chair slid back with a soft hiss against the carpet. Roger that, I said quietly. It wasn't defiance. It was acknowledgement. The way you confirm an order you have no intention of following. My mother finally looked up. Katie, don't make a scene. I'm not making a scene, Mom, I said. I'm ending one. I left 2 crisp 20s under the edge of my plate, my portion of the meal, and stepped away. Each stride felt deliberate, heel to toe, like walking out of a blast radius. Behind me, I could feel their stunned silence pull tight like static before it dissipated. Outside, the night air hit me like cold water. Rain misted down, catching the glow of the street lamps. I stood there, breathing it in, the way I used to breathe after a field march. Lungs burning, mind clear. My phone buzzed in my purse. I already knew who it was. Jessica, good luck finding anyone else to admire your medals. I stared at the message. Not anger, confirmation. In operational terms, it was enemy communication, confirming intent. They hadn't humiliated me by accident. They had established a pattern, and tonight was their victory lap. But victory laps only matter before the counteroffensive. A cab splashed by, tires hissing on wet asphalt. I didn't raise my hand. I just started walking. Each step carried the same rhythm I drilled into platoons on long ruck marches. Measured pace, controlled breathing, mind quiet. Underneath that quiet, though, Something else stirred. Not rage, not revenge. Just clarity. A soldier's kind of clarity. The kind that comes when the objective crystallizes. They thought humiliation ended the battle. They were wrong. It had only clarified the mission parameters. As I reached the corner, I caught my reflection in a darkened window. Hair damp, jaw set, eyes steady. I looked nothing like the girl who once hid her trophy under a bed. I looked like command. I whispered it under my breath, the same way I'd mark a confirmed objective. Copy that. Then I turned toward the lights of the city, ready to plan. By the time my flight touched down in Virginia the next morning, the humiliation had cooled into something cleaner. Not vengeance. Clarity. Every soldier knows the difference between reaction and response. A reaction is loud, emotional, chaotic. A response is measured, tactical, permanent. As I rolled my suitcase through the terminal, I was already cataloging assets, allies, and objectives, the same way I would before a field operation. This wasn't a family feud anymore. It was an issue of boundaries, reputation, and honor, and I'd spent a career managing those under far worse pressure. At 0600 hours, I was in my home office, a modest space lined with training manuals, commendation plaques, and one small framed photo of my grandfather in uniform. I set my coffee beside a legal pad and began my briefing notes. Mission objective: establish independence. Secondary objective: secure integrity of financial, emotional, and familial assets. Rules of engagement: no hostility, no emotion, strict protocol. Mark arrived 30 minutes later. He didn't knock. He never needed to. He knew my silence meant authorization. Captain Mark Holden, JAG Corps. Sharp mind, steady gaze. The kind of man who listened like a court stenographer, recording everything, judging nothing. Rough night? He asked, settling into the chair across from me. Expected turbulence, I said. He studied me for a beat, then nodded. Let's get into the mission brief. I slid the old family financial binder toward him. The Ward Support Fund, I said. Set it up 5 years ago. My deployment bonuses, hazard pay, everything. Supposed to cover my parents' later life expenses. Jessica managed it. He frowned. Bad logistics choice. I trusted competence over character, I said. That's on me. He opened the file, scanning quickly. Have you verified the balances? Not yet, I said. That's the recon I need. He nodded once, already writing down a name. I'll bring in an external forensic accountant. Civilian. Discreet. No shared ties. They'll trace every dollar. Keep it clean, I said. I don't want revenge. I want data. Mark smiled faintly. Data is what wins wars. That week unfolded with quiet efficiency. No angry texts, no family phone calls, no outbursts. Just paperwork. The kind of paperwork that decides futures. The accountant, a gray-haired woman named Susan Lee, operated like an intelligence officer. She spoke in numbers, timestamps, and transaction chains. Within days, she had reconstructed the fund's activity with surgical precision. It started small, service fees that weren't authorized. Then reimbursements. Then the real breaches, luxury purchases, private flights, 5-star resort invoices. Susan slid the summary across my desk. You'll want to sit for this, Major. I didn't. I just stood, scanning the columns. $500,000, withdrawn, reallocated, spent. Mark's voice was low, deliberate. We can proceed 2 ways. Civil litigation or a quiet reallocation and closure. You choose. I stared at the numbers, each one a breadcrumb trail of betrayal. Neither, I said finally. We don't fight in the mud. We build higher ground. He understood instantly. Donation? I nodded. All remaining funds, full liquidation, unrestricted contribution to a military family foundation. Turn what they corrupted into something honorable. That's when the silence in the room changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Final. Mark leaned back. You realize what this does? Yes, I said. It severs the line. At 1800 hours that same day, I sat at my desk, composed a single email to my financial advisor, and authorized the transfer. The confirmation ping felt like the click of a safety switch disengaging. No announcements, no messages to my family, no grand reveal. The action was the message. They valued money as legacy. I valued honor. Now, the two had been permanently separated. Before shutting down for the night, I opened the small box that held my grandfather's bronze star. The metal caught the lamplight. Steady, unyielding. He'd once told me, "A soldier doesn't win by striking first. She wins by standing last." I placed the metal back in its box, sealed the lid, and whispered the same phrase we used before executing an operation. Mission in motion. Fallout doesn't always start with noise. Sometimes it begins with silence, the kind that follows a detonation you can't hear yet. 2 days after the fund was liquidated, my phone started lighting up like a comms board during an alert drill. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, all from the same number. My father's. I didn't listen to the first few. You can tell tone by waveform alone. The sharp bursts meant shouting. The long pauses meant disbelief. By the fifth message, curiosity, not emotion, got the better of me. I pressed play. "You ungrateful traitor," he roared, his voice cracking mid-sentence. "You destroyed this family's name. That fund was our future. Your mother's retirement, your sister's inheritance." There it was. The word inheritance. Not trust, not care. I stopped the playback halfway through. He wasn't grieving a loss. He was mourning control. A few hours later, a different kind of message came in. A polite email from a Richmond law firm I recognized. Subject: Ward Family Estate. Petition to review testamentary validity. They were suing. I read it twice, then set it down beside my coffee mug. I didn't feel fear or anger, just an odd, cold amusement. They were trying to reclaim the very house my grandfather had left to me in his will, the one I'd already sold. Their claim alleged emotional manipulation of an elderly relative. It would have been laughable if it weren't so revealing. They were still playing a power game, one they'd already lost. I called Mark. "They filed," I said. "I expected as much," he replied. "Paper war, standard retaliation when people run out of leverage. Proceed quietly. Already on it." He filed a counter-response within 48 hours, concise, factual, devastating. He attached notarized estate documents, witness statements from the attorney who drafted the will, and correspondence that confirmed my grandfather's full mental clarity. By the time the hearing date arrived, the case had already collapsed under its own weight. Mark attended in my place. When he returned, his summary was short. "The judge dismissed it in under 15 minutes, he said. He even ordered them to pay your legal fees." I exhaled slowly, not satisfaction, just closure. Procedural justice delivered, no emotional collateral. But in families like mine, defeat rarely travels alone. Jessica switched tactics. If she couldn't win legally, she'd fight socially. Posts began appearing in local community groups, artfully worded rants about a cold, unfeeling military daughter who abandoned her aging parents. She attached smiling family photos, curated captions about honor, sacrifice, and betrayal. It was the digital equivalent of friendly fire. I didn't engage. Mark handled the next phase with the same precision as before. He reached out quietly to a few trusted family friends, retired colonels, one former neighbor, a teacher from my high school who'd always respected my grandfather. He didn't slander anyone. He just provided a single-page document, the verified facts of the fund's misuse, the lawsuit's dismissal, and the final confirmation of a large charitable donation to veterans' housing. He ended the cover letter with one sentence. Major Ward preferred her actions to speak louder than accusations. Within a week, the temperature online dropped. Sympathy turned to silence. Even Jessica's allies stopped sharing her posts. Gossip isn't a weapon if no one's willing to reload it. A month later, I received a short message from one of her former colleagues. "She's out. Firm reviewed her finances. They don't tolerate impropriety. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply. I just turned off my phone, walked to the window, and stood there watching the rain trace clean lines down the glass. No triumph. No gloating. Just weather doing what weather always does, washing the world back to neutral. For the first time in months, my mind went still. It wasn't silence as punishment anymore. It was silence as peace. They had always mistaken quiet for weakness. Now the quiet had become my shield. And my proof. The weeks after the lawsuit ended felt like the aftermath of a long campaign, the kind where the enemy has retreated, but the ground is still smoking. There were no parades, no applause, just an eerie calm that asked the same question every morning. Now what? I'd spent months in defense mode, planning, responding, maneuvering. When the fighting stopped, I realized how much space was left behind. The kind of emptiness that can either become peace or vacuum. I chose peace, but peace takes work. The first order of business was structural. The Army had taught me that the surest way to prevent chaos is to build systems that outlast emotion. So I did what soldiers do after conflict. I fortified. I closed every joint account, revised every beneficiary designation, hired a new financial planner, and drew up a trust in my own name. No family members listed as executors, no shared assets, no gray areas. Every document signed, notarized, filed. Mark helped me draft the legal architecture. He called it my defensive perimeter. I called it freedom. "Everything in your life," he said one evening, tapping the binder we'd compiled, "now runs on integrity and protocol, just like your command units." I smiled faintly. The difference is this one doesn't need salutes. But even the most secure perimeter can't keep out ghosts. Some nights I'd wake before dawn, replaying old dinners, old comments, old silences. The mind has a cruel habit of debriefing the past when the present is finally quiet. One afternoon, while reviewing case notes at the VA office, I saw a flyer pinned to the corkboard near the elevators. Women Veterans Support Circle, Wednesdays 1900, room 314. I stood there longer than I should have. My instinct was to ignore it. Officers don't talk about feelings, they report results. But something about that flyer, the simplicity of it, felt like a quiet order I couldn't ignore. I went. The first night, I sat in the back of the room, posture straight, hands clasped, watching. There were a dozen of us. Marines, airmen, logistics specialists, nurses, every rank, every story. They spoke about things we were trained not to say out loud: isolation, guilt, the quiet ache of coming home and finding no mission left to serve. For 2 sessions, I said nothing, just listened. Then, in the 3rd week, a young Marine named Evans started talking. She couldn't have been more than 25. She described returning from deployment and being told by her family to stop making everyone uncomfortable when she mentioned nightmares. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. And just like that, something inside me broke open. Quietly, without spectacle. A single tear traced down my cheek before I could stop it. When she finished, I found myself speaking without planning to. "You're not a problem," I said softly. "You're a witness." The room went still. She looked up and met my eyes, nodding once. That was the first time in years I felt understood. Not as an officer, not as a daughter, but as a human being who had simply endured. That night, I drove home without music, windows cracked, letting the cool Virginia air wash through the car. Healing, I realized, wasn't an operation. It was weather, unpredictable, cleansing, sometimes cold, but always moving. Mark became part of that weather, too. We'd known each other for years as colleagues, confidants, fellow tacticians. But after everything, something shifted. The silence between us stopped being formal. It became warm. One evening, as we hiked a trail in Shenandoah, The last of the sunset pouring through the trees like liquid copper, he stopped mid-path. "You've fought more battles than most generals," he said quietly. "But you still know how to stand at ease." He reached into his pocket, not with drama, just steadiness. The same word my grandfather once used for me. A simple silver ring glinted in his palm. "I want to be your teammate for whatever comes next." I didn't answer right away. I just took his hand, not a salute, not a surrender, a partnership. The next day, we called my therapist, the first civilian on the new command roster. She laughed and said, "I'll take that as a compliment." Slowly, life took shape again. Not as a return to normal, but as the building of something new on solid ground. The woman who once stood in a restaurant trying not to break was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, stronger, and entirely her own. Peace, I've learned, isn't the absence of conflict. It's the mastery of response. A year after that night in Boston, I stood on a small stage beneath the seal of the William Ward Honor Scholarship Fund. My name wasn't in the spotlight anymore. It was printed in modest letters at the bottom of the banner. That felt right. Rows of cadets filled the auditorium. Bright eyes, nervous postures, the kind of quiet eagerness I used to carry before the world got complicated. The recipient that day was a young woman from a military family, 20 years old, about to start at West Point. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. She spoke of her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, and her dream to serve as a logistics officer. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. "I want to build something that lasts," she said, "not just survive what doesn't." The room applauded, but I heard something deeper. That same word echoing again through time. Steadiness. When she finished, I handed her the ceremonial scholarship envelope. "You've already got everything this program stands for," I told her quietly. "You just don't know it yet." She smiled, that shy, determined kind of smile that comes from recognizing kinship rather than flattery. A camera flash caught the handshake. 2 generations of soldiers connected by something stronger than blood. Purpose. As I stepped off the stage, I thought about the path that had led here. The long road from silence and humiliation to clarity and construction. My family's downfall hadn't been my victory. It had simply been the unmasking of truth. They had chosen pride, appearances, control. I had chosen structure, honor, and forward motion. And the results spoke for themselves, not in headlines, but in the quiet stability of a life reclaimed. Mark waited for me near the back of the hall, his dress uniform jacket slung over one arm. He gave me that subtle nod soldiers use instead of applause. Mission accomplished. No need for words. Driving home that evening, the highway stretched out under a deep Virginia dusk. The sky glowed that particular shade of blue you only see at the edge of peace. Neither daylight nor darkness, just transition. The bronze star rested in the glove box, right where it belonged. Not on display, not forgotten. Just present. A symbol of steadiness, not glory. I thought about my father's voice in that restaurant. Sharp, cruel, unforgettable. The same words that once pierced now felt distant, stripped of their power. They weren't commands anymore. They were data. Lessons filed. Processed. Archived. You can't control how people see you. You can only control the precision of your own actions. The integrity of your response. That's what the Army taught me. That's what life confirmed. When you stop trying to win someone's approval, you finally earn your own. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically. Steady, unwavering, doing its job without applause. I stood there for a moment, watching the glow cut through the darkness. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Dignity doesn't expire. And respect, real respect, doesn't need to be demanded. It only needs to be demonstrated. Have you ever seen someone underestimated until the truth spoke for itself? If you have, subscribe and share this story. New stories of hidden strength and quiet justice, every day on echoes of revenge.